Hey everybody, my name's Montana, and I'm so glad you're here for another week in our series about choosing wisdom when it comes to your mindset. It's called Your New Playlist, and it's your guide to tapping into the power of a healthy, God-honoring mindset every day. Okay, I want to show you something. Do any of you guys have like a record player in your home? They're vintage and cool in a throwback kind of way, and a lot of times people like to listen to their favorite music on vinyl records. The only downside to an old record player? Sometimes they get stuck, especially if there's a scratch on the vinyl. Yeah, pretty annoying, right? See, even the smallest flaw or imperfection on a record means that the song won't play the way it's supposed to. It goes from being a smooth, beautiful song to a scratchy, skippy portion of the song on repeat. The same thing can happen with our thoughts, which make up the playlists in our minds. When we're focused on our flaws or imperfections, suddenly it's like the positive playlist in our minds has a record scratch. Those negative thoughts are stuck on repeat like a broken record in our minds. I remember when I was in 6th grade and I had a best friend named Katie. We did everything together. But then a new girl came to school, also named Katie. I know, confusing, right? And they became friends. Before I knew it, they were spending all their time together, and all I could think about was how I probably wasn't a great friend, and I probably wasn't as funny or trendy as the new girl. Those negative thoughts just kept repeating over and over again in my mind. I bet you can relate to that in some way or another, because part of being human is dealing with difficult stuff. The stuff that makes us feel anxious about who we are. The stuff that makes us feel left out, unnoticed, unimportant, unloved. The stuff that makes us feel like we're not enough. Maybe that's what the broken record in your mind sounds like. Your playlist is stuck on repeat with a lot of negative, unhelpful thoughts. Maybe you don't feel popular enough, or smart enough, or good enough. I know we've all been there. We all feel like we're not enough in so many areas of our lives. I think every person on the planet has experienced at least one of these thoughts. And honestly, I understand why. If we can just be enough in some way or another, then surely things in our life will be better, right? Like, if I'm popular enough, I'll never get left out again. Or if I'm smart enough, I'll never feel dumb or stressed about grades again. Or if I'm good enough, I'll fit in. But the problem with all this, there's no such thing as enough. It isn't real. No matter what, will never actually be enough. Even when you're popular, there's always someone more popular. Even when you're smart, one bad grade can throw off your confidence. And even if you were good enough and maybe you won that soccer tournament that you were so stressed about, the next loss might make you question your abilities. See what I mean? No matter what we do, what we get, or how hard we try to be enough, there will always be something that keeps us from getting there. And when that happens, that broken record playlist starts all over again in your mind. So how do we change the playlist when we feel like we're never enough? Here's where I want you to start. Think about birds. Yeah, you heard me right. When thoughts of not being enough start running like a broken record in your mind, I want you to think about birds. Now, if that sounds weird, I get it, but trust me, it works. Besides, it isn't actually my idea, it's actually from Jesus himself, so you can blame him. But when he was alive on earth, Jesus used a lot of examples that his friends, followers, and listeners would understand. Back then, birds were common, like they are today. So the people Jesus was talking to would have totally followed him when he started talking about birds. So let's read what he said. What's the price of a pet canary? Some loose change, right? And God cares what happens to it even more than you do. He pays even greater attention to you down to the last detail, even numbering the hairs on your head. So don't be intimidated by all this bully talk. You're worth more than 1,000,000 canaries. Okay, back then, a common bird didn't cost very much at all. It wasn't something most people considered valuable. It certainly wasn't enough to make you feel like, well, enough. But Jesus was basically saying, you know that little bird that everybody thinks isn't that big of a deal? Well, God cares about it. knows about it, and thinks about it a lot. And if God cares that much about that little bird, how much more do you think God cares about you? In other words, you are enough. When you don't feel like you measure up, when something about yourself makes you feel anxious or self-conscious, when the thoughts of not being enough play like a broken record on repeat, you can remember that God says you are enough. God knows you, loves you, thinks about you, and cares about you just the way you are. Just like God cares about even the smallest creatures on earth, like a bird. God values you even more. You are enough in God's eyes, and that's enough. I know this is a lot easier to talk about than to actually believe about yourself. It's great to hear that God says you're enough, but if we're honest, we'd probably admit it doesn't always feel that way. That's when we have to make the choice to change the thoughts that make up our playlist. And here are 2 ways that we can start doing that. Number 1, notice when the record is broken. Pay attention to the playlists in your mind. When you find yourself thinking the same negative thoughts on repeat, that's a sign it may be time to change the record. And number 2, replace that broken record with a new one. Change the playlist telling you that you aren't enough. Put on a new playlist that tells you the truth about who you are, that reminds you that you are enough. Remember when I was telling you about my friend Katie and her new friend Katie? Yeah, I know, still confusing. Well, when I finally changed the record playing in my head, aka changed my mindset about who I was, I started to see the situation so differently. Yeah, it was hard to see my best friend get another close friend, but once I told myself that my negative thoughts were all lies, I started to realize that Katie didn't believe those lies either. She didn't think I was a bad friend. I was just making those things up in my head. And the cool part about it was, once I stopped those negative thoughts and gave the other Katie a chance, I ended up getting another awesome friend. From then on, it was just Montana and Katie and Katie. Yeah, I know. Replacing these broken records is something we all have to practice. One way you can do that is by putting scripture in your mind every day that shares the truth of who God is and who you are. The Psalms, a collection of songs and poems in the Old Testament, is a great place to start. In fact, when my broken record tells me I'm not enough, I put this verse on repeat in its place. I praise you because I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Your works are wonderful. I know that full well. When I struggle to believe that I'm enough, repeating this truth helps me. This week, I'd love to challenge you to do the same. Maybe even work on memorizing it with your small group. Here at Eastside, we believe small groups are one of the best places for you to grow in faith alongside other people who want to do the same. One way you can do that, by memorizing this verse together and remembering the truth that you are enough, because God believes you're enough, and so do we here at Eastside.